Morning, everyone. Happy, oh my God, how long are the school holidays day? And welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's deputy online political editor, Lizzy Buchan. Morning, Lizzy.
Morning.
We're going to take you through the biggest stories of the day. We want you to get into the comments, ask us your questions. We can't answer them all, but we will answer the best ones. So, what have we got today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on some sabre rattling by Dominic Raab at Iran, which we shall treat with the contempt it deserves and completely ignore. Just like Tehran won't when they use it as an excuse to make Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe's conditions even worse. Thank you, Dominic. Now, perhaps of more relevance to most of us, though, is yet more continued holiday chaos, with an announcement due later today from Grant Shapps about what countries will be which colour on the government's traffic light warning system. Now, it's quite a big traffic light these days because at the moment it's got 6 different colours. It's got green watch list, amber watch list, red, and France, which has a colour all of its own. Sort of cheesy one, I expect. Now, Lizzy, take us through this. What's the Transport Secretary going to say later on about where we can and can't go? What do we know?
So he's actually going to make the announcement later this week. It's on Thursday, we believe,
right, sorry.
at the moment. So it's part of the 3 weekly review of the traffic light list, which apparently has been called RAG in government, for red, amber, green. Yeah. So they're looking at the data this week and kind of trying to decide which countries are basically safe to visit without quarantine. So you've got green, which means you don't have to isolate when you return. There's green watch list, which means these are countries that are sort of tipping towards amber. Then there's amber, which before meant that you had to quarantine for up to 10 days when you got home. But now, if you're double vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine anymore. It's only for people who have only had one or no jabs. And then there's this new category that they're talking about, which is amber watch list, which is for countries that are tipping towards red. And then there's red, where you have to spend 10 days in a government-backed quarantine hotel at a cost of £1,750 per person. So that's not a great option for most people.
And what's the France option?
And then there's France. And then France, which was given its own category at the last minute and which has been sort of dubbed Amber Plus, which basically means that France is the quarantine exemption for amber destinations doesn't apply to France. So this means that even if you're double vaccinated, you still have to quarantine for 10 days when you get home. And that was kind of brought in out of sync of the reviews because of concern about the prevalence of the beta variant, which is the one that was first identified in South Africa. And there was a bit of confusion last week about the fact that one of Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, suggested that this was mainly to do with the fact that there are lots of beta variant cases in a place called Réunion Island, which is about 6,000 miles away from mainland France. And then the Transport Secretary had to come out and say, no, there are also beta cases in France. We're not just basing this entire decision on Réunion, but the French are furious about it, say it's totally over the top, and they want us to review it. So that's the kind of basics of what the government is looking at this week. And I think Thursday is when we should get some more light.
So what they're looking at fundamentally is chaos, it would appear, and seeing how they can organise it a little bit better. Now, Rishi Sunak apparently wants us to open up more travel to help the economy. What do you think about that? Get into the comments, ask us your questions. Are you planning to go away anywhere? Do you want to go away? Are you staying at home? Are you keen to find out about one particular country? You got something booked? If you want to go at the last minute, where do you stand on all this? But Sunak wants us to open up to ease the economy and to ease his furlough bills as well, somewhat. But on the Prime Minister's other shoulder are the scientists who have been screaming at him for a year and a half so far about lax border controls. And we arguably can't open up while there are new variants circulating if we don't catch them at the border when they come in or come back from holiday. About 3% of people go to Spain are coming back with COVID at the moment. So are there any plans, Lizzy, to make those border controls a bit tougher? Because they are pretty porous at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, so not as far as I'm aware. I mean, there's been this long kind of this tension between, government ministers, the scientists, the airline industry about travel. And, Rishi Sunak had a very big kind of intervention on Sunday where he made it, he in the Sunday Times, it was revealed that he'd written to the PM to kind of raise these concerns. And Tory cabinet ministers were sort of falling over themselves yesterday to make it clear that they're also really worried about travel, because they know that imposing stricter quarantine rules is really unpopular. Whilst the public ask kind of, there is support among the public for kind of keeping like variants at bay, keeping these rules in place, what people don't like is the chaos. It's the changing of decisions. It's the, new categories at the last minute, like people being forced to rush back. Because if you've taken a decision to go on holiday, the government kind of holiday abroad, the government argues that, you should be aware of the risks of that decision. But the last minute kind of stuff is very unpopular and makes the government look chaotic and bonkers. So, Rishi Sunak's trying to kind of come down on that side. But it seems like there is not really, they're not planning. They're just basically going to try and see what happens. I mean, the other thing I didn't mention, which is also a big change, is that from today, EU and US arrivals in the UK no longer have to quarantine if they're double vaccinated. So that's quite a big change, because before you could only, like, your jab was only recognised if it was on the NHS. So that's a big change as well. And some of the scientists are quite concerned about that, because some of, if you're checking people's passes at the airport, that could potentially cause quite large queues. If you're looking at kind of people coming from the US, from European countries, who've got different kinds of passes. Some European countries have got jabs that are not recognised. I think the Russian Sputnik, there's one called Sinopharm that's manufactured by China that is often used in Hungary. So there's going to have to be quite a lot of checks to make sure that people aren't coming through with these kind of jabs that are not recognised by the European and British regulators.
Yeah, and depending as well on what kind of proof you have, if you have one of these jabs from another country, as to whether it's, something that you can present fraudulently or easily photocopy, or whether it's something that's a bit more secure. Now, Ben says, is Turkey going to be on the amber list soon? Turkey's cases are supposedly going up, aren't they, Lizzy?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is we don't know. And I don't.
The government doesn't know, Ben.
No,
nobody knows. Turkey doesn't know. No. COVID probably doesn't know.
And I think they probably won't make any. The government probably won't make any decisions until right before they announce it. They normally wait like right up to the last minute, and then there'll be a meeting on Thursday where they'll look at the data. They'll get the advice from the Joint Biosecurity Centre, which kind of looks at all of this, the cases, the variant risks abroad, and. Yeah, so I would expect to see quite a lot of speculation over the next couple of days about which countries could go up, which ones could go down. But at the moment, it's very difficult to know. But I think keeping an eye on case rates and that sort of thing, and vaccination rates, is kind of a good indicator of where things might be going, but it's not foolproof.
Yeah. And Mandy says, what about all the expats stuck in red list countries? It's not about holidays. British residents want to get home to see their families without the extortionate hotel quarantine fees. There's an awful lot of travel, Lizzy, which is to do with work, to do with families, to do with people who've got loved ones in other countries. And there's also this general attitude that I can sort of see creeping through into some of the government stuff, which is that they've all got quite a bit of money, and that none of them have really come from backgrounds that are terribly not well off. And so they've never sort of had to spend money on a holiday and save up all year to pay for it and plan for months in advance and organise work and everything else to try and fit around it. They just go on holiday, bang, like that tomorrow. And if they've got to fly back suddenly because there's a quarantine issue, they just bang, get the next flight. They don't seem to comprehend how other people holiday or travel, I should say, as Mandy says, they're not all for holidays. There just seems to be like a complete absence in the government of being aware of what and why other people travel, how they do it, and why.
Yeah, I think there's a tricky thing in the way that the government messaging is moving now, which is that they keep kind of referring back to this kind of idea of common sense, you know, that the public can make a common sense decision about what they're going to do. And, you know, if they're going to risk going on holiday, then that's their, you know, that's their problem, basically. That if you, whereas actually, the reality is it's not really for the public to make common sense decisions. You know, the government are the ones who are getting top, like up to the minute briefings from experts about all of these situations. You know, like it's our job to be following these things all the time. And, you know, I don't know whether Turkey's going to go onto the, you know, change list or whatever. So how could somebody who has a job and has other things that are not related to sort of following what the government's doing every day, be able to make these decisions? I think, you know, there is a lack of recognition on that. And I think you're right as well that, you know, there is an attitude that, you know, oh, well, people don't need to go on holiday, they don't need to do this. But like, actually, as you say, quite a lot of foreign travel is based on not just holidays, but visiting family, going for work, you know, going for family, like life events, emergencies, things that are not just because you're going for a laugh, or things that have been planned for a long time. Like plenty of people have had holidays that they booked back in 2019 that have been postponed from 2020 that are now coming this year. And, you know, they're about to lose a lot of money. And
they can't postpone them again. There's a lot of people who push back and push back and push back. And the travel companies and the insurance companies are now saying, well, it's amber or it's green. So if you don't go now, then you lose all your money. And so therefore they have to go. It's not up to them to make a common sense decision whether they can or not. It should surely be up to the government to ensure that when people come in and go out, that those borders are controlled to the extent that people are tested and checked, and that are allowed through either way when they're safe.
Yeah, and we have this tension now of like the government's trying to lift restrictions to move away from telling people what they should and shouldn't do. But after, you know, 16 months of telling everybody in very, very granular detail what they can and can't do with their lives, it's quite a difficult process because we're all used to being given quite strict advice about how we can live our lives, including like legal restrictions on our freedoms. And now we're expected to suddenly make our own minds up about everything without really having the full information. And that's quite a difficult position to put people in. And I think we're going to keep seeing this tension sort of throughout the summer and into the autumn of like the government saying, well, you know, it's not a legal thing to do, but you should do it. And it's like, well, what should I do if it's not the law, but you're advising me? But if you thought it really mattered, wouldn't you make it the law? Like that makes it quite a challenging situation for people.
Is it important? Is it moral? Is it reasonable? Is all different to whether or not it's legal. Now keep asking your questions. Are you going abroad? Do you want to go abroad? Are you happy to stay at home? I'm going on holiday next week and I'm staying in the UK. Because the not just the thought of getting abroad, but the kerfuffle of doing it seemed to be a bit much, frankly. Now, Caroline says, if people get COVID while they're on holiday, presumably they no longer have insurance, as we no longer have the EHIC card. I don't know if didn't we continue doing the EHIC thing with the European Union for a while, Lizzy? Or did that?
But that is no longer the case. I would strongly recommend anybody who goes on holiday having very good travel insurance.
And make sure you've got health insurance tucked into your travel insurance. You should have the right for hospital treatment in wherever you're going to. Make sure you've got that and don't rely on an EHIC, which if that no longer exists. Now, Sam says, do you think a high demand in domestic holidays in the UK is a good thing? Well, I've got a friend who's got a couple of holiday cottages, which she was mortgaged to the hilt to pay for, and had to have mortgage holidays on it because last year she earned no money at all. Everyone cancelled. That was that. It was too grim. So this year she's got bookings again, and she's desperately trying to get that in so she can clear the debts that she's built up last year. There are some people who've got, you know, much bigger companies and own lots and lots of properties, but most holiday lets, I think, are sort of fairly mum and pop kind of small family enterprises, things on farms and stuff like that to help farmers get by. I think a high demand in that's probably a good thing. It's certainly a good thing for Blackpool and Skegness and the coastal places, Lizzy, because they're going to be making money hand over fist, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up near a seaside town, and I'm very pro a British holiday. And I think, lots of businesses have had such a tough time having an influx of tourists, you know, going to buy ice cream, going to pubs, going to restaurants is a good thing. Obviously, people get a bit nervous about the virus and that being moved around the country. But I think, you know, I think that getting more people to be thinking about spending money in the UK is a good thing. Obviously, it's tricky because prices have gone up, and you know, because there's such high demand and lots of things
still cheaper than quarantine, though. If you come from a red list
cheaper
country.
than a 10-day stay in a horrible government-backed hotel.
So you've got to have tests to go to Cornwall.
Exactly.
They may do that one day.
Yeah, and you know, if you're having a holiday in the UK, you don't have to deal with the kind of complicated administration and the ups and downs of, you know, is my holiday destination going to change while I'm there, before I go? You know, am I going to have to fly back? Am I going to have to suddenly quarantine when I get back? That could make your holiday quite stressful. So, you know, pro an English holiday or anywhere in the UK if that floats your boat.
Mike says, our holiday to Spain last month didn't happen. We lost £900. Holiday was Southport and Blackpool instead, and they were packed. Well, I'm sure the people in Southport and Blackpool were delighted, and that's as it should be. It's also worth bearing in mind there's no border wait to get your passport checks when you come back from Blackpool. So that's another plus for it. Now, keep asking us your questions. How do you feel about the amber watch list or the green watch list? How do you feel about France? Do you want to go on holiday abroad? Are you waiting and are you sort of being forced to holiday abroad by your travel company that won't refund you? Or have you got some kind of other choices or decisions to make? Let us know. Get in the comments. Now, we've got another story we want to talk about, because over the weekend, the FT, which is another newspaper, you don't need to read it, I read it for you, revealed a fresh cash for access scandal, which, of course, politicians of all parties quite enjoy, but the Tories are perhaps best at. The allegation is this chap here, Ben Elliott, who is a nephew of Camilla Parker Bowles and co-chairman of the Tory party, has a secret group of millionaires forming and I quote, advisory body for the Prime Minister and the Chancellor Rishi Sunak. And they have dinners with them once a month or a Zoom call in return for £250,000 a year donations. Now, to most of us, that's a house. So if you give the Prime Minister the equivalent of a house, he will talk to you and let you advise him on his decisions, which I find astonishing. Why the hell is the Prime Minister being advised by people who are not in the job of actually running the government? But anyway, more recently, they have revealed that someone who donated £15,000 to the Tories got to have dinner with Ben's uncle Charlie. There he is with Auntie Camilla, also known as the Prince of Wales, to discuss some charity donations. Now, Lizzie, does this all stink as much as my nose says it does? Or is this all completely reasonable behaviour?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that everybody involved says that there's not a problem, but it doesn't look great. I mean, it's for people who follow, you know, this sort of thing. It's not surprising in the sense that, you know, there have been repeated examples of what you've described as cash for access, basically, of Conservative Party donors being given kind of preferential access to the Prime Minister, you know, to senior Conservatives. I mean, the party has plenty of like regular fundraising things where, you know, there's a famous black and white ball that they do every year for donors with ministers.
But that's all known about, isn't it? And the thing with this is that it's not even in the Tory literature. It is completely hidden. It only came out because of a whistleblower who was at some of these meetings who said, this is going on, by the way.
Yeah.
So
and
they seem to be guilty about it, or feeling guilty, I should say.
Yeah. And it's, you know, this guy, Ben Elliott, who's the co-chairman, is clearly a very well connected person and has clearly used he has a private business called which is described as a concierge company, where he basically has connected people from that with people in the Conservative Party, and that is, you know, there are lots of questions to be answered about this. You know, Labour have been saying that they need to declare everybody who has been involved in this, that the public have a right to know, which they do, because, you know, if the Tories say they're not doing anything wrong, then why can't we know who was there? You know, there's been issues with this before, where Ben Elliott arranged a dinner party, I think it was before the pandemic, where Robert Jenrick, the housing secretary, sat next to a Tory donor who then lobbied him repeatedly over a housing development in East London, and Jenrick got into a bit of trouble about that. So, you know, there is this very kind of murky line between people with, you know, huge resources and business interests and their involvement with people in government. And the government say, you know, well, this doesn't, the Tory party says, oh, this doesn't impact on our policy decisions, but it's hard to see how it doesn't. You know,
no, especially if you call it an advisory board. If you call it an advisory board, they're those people think they're advising you, even if you think they're not. Now, there's the argument for sort of state funding for political parties, so that everyone is above board, would mean that the two biggest parties now would always be the two biggest parties forever, and it would mean that, you know, an insurgent party that was coming up from underneath wouldn't be able to break through, wouldn't get the funding. It's very important they have this cash in order to fight general elections, for the advertising and the TV ads and for the, you know, some of the materials that go out, as well as, of course, buying Facebook space and, you know, bending your mind a little bit. But as I think it was Caroline just there was saying, it's the access to it's partly the fact that this is a secret, which is a bit of a problem, because it should all be above board. If they're going to fundraise privately themselves, it must be above board. But as Caroline says, it's paying for access to the Tory party and to Ben Elliott's company, and then also at the same time getting dinner with Prince Charles. Now, I'm sure they're not quite as connected as they might at first glance seem, but it does look like he's having dinner with Tory donors who have given money to the Tory party, and that is, you know, that's not being above party politics. And if he's going to be king one day, he does have to. When's he last had dinner with a trade unionist? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, this is really awkward for Prince Charles, because obviously he has this personal connection with Ben Elliot because of Ben Elliot being the Duchess of Cornwall's nephew. And yeah, there was a story in the Times about the fact that he had dinner with this telecoms billionaire who's called Mohammed Amersi in 2013 in Scotland, which was effectively organised by Elliot. And, you know, Clarence House say, oh, you know, there's nothing wrong here, you know, and also that the Prince of Wales has a number of charitable interests that he will, you know, lobby, like he will speak to business people about. You know, he has a huge charitable portfolio that he's trying to, you know, get people to support. But even though these issues are separate, it just kind of swirls together as a kind of like slightly like a murky picture for Elliot and for the Conservative Party of, you know, big business influence and, you know, access to the royals as well. It shows that, you know, there is a kind of network of these kind of individuals who are connected to each other at the very top of society. And I think that doesn't, you know, that can kind of stick in the craw a bit to ordinary people who just, you know, have obviously have no level of access compared to this sort of thing.
If you had an advisory board that was sort of, I don't know, selected like jury service, you had a millionaire, you had a single mum, you had a disabled person, you had a lesbian and a homosexual and someone who's trans, whatever. But if you just got an advisory board of people from all different walks of life and they all got to have a chat to the Prime Minister once a month, that would be fair and reasonable. Stick a millionaire on it, I don't care. But, you know, the fact that it's only the millionaires that get the access is the problem, isn't it? Because it's said in the FT that they've been asking the Prime Minister, or someone has suggested cuts to public services, which we suffer from and they don't, and cuts to taxes, which they benefit from, corporation taxes, and which most of us don't. So, I mean, it stinks.
It also comes
more people who eat football pies than your own football clubs. Do you know what I mean?
It also kind of comes after a period of, you know, quite damaging sort of sleaze rows. You know, the government has just been mired in stuff throughout the whole of the pandemic of, you know, dodgy contracts, like access to like VIP access for Tory contacts to kind of PPE contracts, things like that. You know, issues about like the spending, who paid for the Prime Minister's flat, like all sorts of stuff throughout the pandemic, which is kind of, you know, we've been kicking off about for a really long time. And, you know, the government says, oh, the public don't care. You know, Boris's poll ratings are really good. They're not interested in all this stuff. Like Labour are wrong to kind of keep kicking off about sleaze. But I don't know. I believe that there will come a point where this drip of sleaze and sleaze and sleaze will eventually kind of reach the top of the glass and overflow, because you never know what will be the thing that tips it over. But I just think the public don't like, one thing we've seen during the pandemic is the public don't like one rule for them, one rule for us. They really don't like that.
It's a very dodgy defense to say, yes, we're completely immoral, potentially illegal, but nobody cares.
Just don't care.
Because the British public is immoral and doesn't care about the law either. Because, mate, you're only going to upset people. But, you know, won't be long before it's holidays for access or something like that. Oh, wait, hang on. They do that already, don't they? But never mind. Let's leave holidays behind for a bit. If you have any more questions, we're going to round up some of the holiday questions at the end. So stick around for that. We'll try and answer what we can. But let us know, how do you feel about cash for access? Would you pay 15 grand for dinner with Prince Charles? Or would you do it, you know, pay 15 grand not to have dinner with him? Would you give a house to the Conservative Party or the value of a house to the Conservative Party if you got to have a seat on the advisory board and tell Boris Johnson where he's going wrong? I might think about it now and again if I had a house spare, which I don't. Now, but we do have some good news about the things that have been going on, because people are not as immoral and awful as Boris Johnson thinks they are. And here it is. Ta-da! Now, some of us find it difficult to get the motivation to leave the sofa, even with a full complement of limbs and organs. But cricket mad Rob Franks, there he is, who lost his left leg above the knee a short while ago when he developed a tumour, is back at the crease in a carbon fibre blade. Not only is this guy running about at 42, which is pretty good, speaking of someone who's not that much older, but he's bowling, he's fielding, he's batting as well. It's very impressive. But even more so, Lizzy, is how he actually got this blade, isn't it?
Yeah, this is such a nice story. So he basically crowdfunded to raise money for the blade, because they're quite expensive. And I think this one costs like £12,500, but basically he got a bunch of cricket fans. I think 500 people gave donations so that he could get the blade and get it fitted. And yeah, it's just really just a really nice example of kind of people, you know, people being kind of generous and surprising, and yeah, hopefully, you know, giving him another chance.
Exactly. And you get to be fit and healthy, still running about. I know a double amputee who goes to the gym regularly. I don't, and I've got all my limbs and organs, but I can't be bothered. But it's but one thing when you have an amputation is that it's very difficult to put on weight and to become less healthy in the bits of you that are remaining. And so to have him still running about and doing what he loves as well, that's the important thing, keeping his mind fit and active as well as his body. And the people who've donated to help him do it, I think that just shows that most British people have a good sense of what's right and wrong and where the morals of something lie. And I just can't understand why they're still voting for Boris Johnson. But there we go. Maybe they'll figure it out in the end. Now, I think we might have some more questions to round up. Sarah, good morning, Sarah. Is it true you have COVID 3 weeks before you have any symptoms? If so, people might not be coming home with it. They could be taking it with them. I'm so confused. And why are we having to pay over £1,000 to isolate on return from Red Country if we have it in our bodies and 3 weeks before we travel? I don't think you have it for 3 weeks. I don't know where you've seen that. I haven't seen that anywhere. Lizzy, have you heard about that? You have it fairly quickly and then sort of you develop it in under a week, don't you?
Yeah, no, I've not heard... I've not seen any evidence that it's 3 weeks before you have symptoms. I think that the symptoms tend to develop fairly quickly if you're going to get symptoms. Obviously, you do have people who don't have any symptoms and have the virus without knowing, but most people who get it tend to develop symptoms within a few days of contracting the virus. So that's why all of these decisions have been taken. You know, if it was 3 weeks before, they would have a longer run up to a lot of these quarantine decisions and things like that. So I don't think you need to worry about that.
If you're going for a short trip, you could have it in you, take it out and bring it back again, but you know, in a day or two kind of thing. But the whole reason why we're having to pay £1,750 to isolate in a government hotel is because the government have not done the border controls in the way other nations have, where they have a government-run facility. You come off the plane, you get taken to a room, you get tested, you get given some food, you have a bed, and they let you out when the test comes back clean and positive. You know, and it's free. It's all part of the service because they want to protect their country, and it's worth the government paying for that because that keeps the country safe and it saves them lots of money in the long run. For some reason, we don't do that because the people who run the country don't think £1,750 is a lot of cash. Now, Nuala, good morning, Nuala. I'm in Portugal. I'm double jabbed. The bars and restaurants are extremely well run. And there's not a chance you get in anywhere without masks, and you're always asked to use the sanitizers. Everyone complies. Even children wear masks. I'm enjoying every moment. No stress at the airport either, leaving. Hope you're the same when you come back, Nuala, because I have heard there's an awful lot of problems with coming back into Britain with checks and everything else. They've got to check your jabs and your tests and everything else, and the border force is running rather low on staff, aren't they, Lizzy?
Yeah, we've had repeated sort of concerns about staffing levels from border force, who obviously got this challenging situation of trying to sort of monitor who's coming in and out. So yeah, I think hopefully your return to the UK will not be bumpy, but we have heard of, you know, people facing long queues, challenging situations coming back in. And I wonder, we'll see over the next couple of days what the impact of the changes to the rules around allowing fully jabbed arrivals from the US and the EU will have on kind of passenger numbers and people coming into this country. Because that could, you know, you're going to have to check different travel documents. I think there's a EU green pass and an American CDC certificate or whatever, which show your vaccine status. So border force are going to have to be checking those, as well as the NHS app, to kind of make sure that everybody's got the right jabs to be coming back in. So yeah, there may be challenges, but really nice to hear you're enjoying your holiday. And
yeah, well done, Nuala.
Yeah, hopefully, you know, hopefully it will be smooth.
Fingers crossed. Bear in mind as well, it's worth taking the government's infection numbers, which say that infections are falling, with a pinch of salt. Professor Tim Spector, who's the man behind the Zoe COVID app, has changed his methodology for how he's counting the infections in order to take vaccines into account. And the government hasn't done that. And he says that as a result, he reckons infections are about double what the government says it is. Although they are plateauing, they're fairly steady. He says that they are significantly higher than the government's official stats on like 30,000 infections a day. He reckons it's nearer 60. So just take it with a pinch of salt, maybe, the UK infection rate. But well done, Nuala, for having a nice holiday. I'm on holiday next week, so there will be no news agenda, and the rest of the Mirror stops getting hassled to come in here with me and spend half an hour in the morning like Lizzy has done today. Thank you very much for your time, Lizzy. Thank you, everyone, for taking part, and we will see you not next week, but we'll see you on Wednesday, and then we're off for a week. So come back on Wednesday for our last one. It'll be silly season mad, hopefully. See you then. Bye-bye.